Yes. Okay. So we are live and hello and good afternoon, everyone. And welcome to the 16th episode of PsyTalks with Psychologist for Psychologists. And I'm your host, Ms. Basha, Director at ICHAS, Institute of Clinical Hypnosis and Related Sciences. Today we have with us Anil Thomas. He is into Gestalt Therapy and he'll be talking about it. And before I begin, whosoever is watching us, and please do join us. And if you have any kind of questions with related to the topic or with related to the therapeutic work, you can definitely ask those questions in the comment section and we'll answer them. And you can also start a watch party on Facebook so that your friends and family can benefit out of it. About iChas, we are an institute that provides advanced coaching and therapeutic skills to trainers, coaches, psychologists, and all mental health care practitioners. So, a bit about Anil. He's an eminent facilitator in the field of human development. He's internationally certified NLP master trainer and a gestalt therapist. Anil is among the first in India to be sharing the skills, tools, and techniques of the original code of NLP and gestalt therapy at par with the international standards of founding members. He is recognized for bringing in success in various fields of life using wisdom gained from his extensive experience as an academician. So I'll tell you guys, he is from a science background or mostly chemistry background person. So yeah, and I'm sure he'll add more to it when he comes to talk. And he's a keynote speaker, a therapist, a coach, and a facilitator. So we'd like to welcome Anil on Psych Talks.
Thank you, Ms. Ba, for this opportunity to be on this platform where there's a
Great,
group
our
of people
pleasure.
which really makes a difference in the lives of many.
Thank you. So Anil, just a brief introduction from your end before we move ahead with the just talk.
My introduction, huh?
Uh, so something from your
Means
side, I have given though.
I think what you covered is just perfect. You've covered who am
Okay,
I and what I do, and I think that's just perfect.
okay. So you want me to take it further? So yeah, let's start with the topic. Gestalt is something that I want to understand as well as my audience would like to know about what is Gestalt, origin, or what is it, the
In
history behind.
English, there, yeah, in English, doesn't matter how much you try, there isn't a definite meaning of the word Gestalt. And everything that we speak will be only an attempt to explain Gestalt. It will never be Gestalt.
Mhm.
Gestalt is what balance is. Gestalt is the togetherness of all of it to understand. It's not one without the other because that will not make sense. It's the Shiv and the Parvati and the Sati, and it's the context. And unless you understand the context, you don't understand the behavior. And if you don't understand the behavior, you don't understand the potentiality. And if you don't understand the potentiality, you don't understand the individual. So Gestalt is bringing that to the field.
So could you just tell from what would be the history of it, a little bit about it before we go with more application into
If not for Fritz, I think Gestalt would have died in the books of psychology many times. He's the one who brings Gestalt, and he's so unique. His acuity to the sensory base. That man is a genius. And I think Gestalt died one more time after Fritz, until Richard Bandler found out what Gestalt is in the transcripts when he was working with the publication house, and that's when Gestalt took one more breath, and that's how Gestalt is here in the field, in the popular field. Yeah, otherwise it would have been in the field of only psychologists and serious students, but now it's come into the popular field. It's come into the open field. Yeah, and that's bringing in to see where the Gestalt is in the body. Yeah,
it.
and there's been, I think, hundreds and thousands of papers written on it. A lot of people devoted their entire life to bring Gestalt, to bring the authentic, congruent Gestalt to the field, not just paper gestalt, and I think that was one of Fritz's biggest endeavors to convert paper people to real people.
Okay. So would you say that the current mental health care practitioners would it, should they learn Gestalt to integrate that in their practice?
Uh, I wouldn't say that, and nor would I say that that's not true. I think it's an individual choice to what modality they would like to take. And I would also say that doesn't matter which modality you take, the end product of all modality would be same. And it's not that this modality is better than that modality, or these are just tools. The skill is in you. If you don't work on the skill, the tools will fail, the techniques will fail, but the skills will not. So the biggest tool of the therapist is the therapist himself or herself. That's the most potent tool. That's the most pregnant tool. And if they're not working on self, there is no tool which can upgrade themselves.
Uh, I think I completely agree on that part. Yes, it's about the knowledge and how do you apply it with your set of competency is
I'm
something.
losing you.
Okay, can you hear me now? So I was saying that yes, it's about the acquired knowledge plus the application and the competency to use it. That's how it
Yeah.
helps. So quickly we
Yeah.
will,
There's an old saying. There's
yeah,
an old saying in the grounds of UCSC. They say that knowledge is useless. It's only a rumor if it's not in your muscle. So it doesn't matter how much you know what you know. It's just garbage if it's not applied. It's like learning swimming on the floor if you can't swim. So the practice of the practices is what will bring the difference, that will create the difference, and the difference will stay. So that's what Fritz believes. Or that's what Dick would have said all his life, that the therapist is the most potent tool. And all the tools will fail if the skills are not in place.
so Anil will quickly say hi to everybody who's online watching us and will be asking questions in a while. So hello everybody, thank you for joining in. And today we have Anil. He's going to talk about a lot. He's going to talk about just all, which give us all the gyan on it. And yeah, there is Baljeet from Jammu and Kashmir. And yeah, hello everyone. And yeah, I am sure there is a network issue. I'm really sorry for that, but not in my hands. That part. So coming back to my question of um, how would a psychologist use or a mental health care practitioner use gestalt in their therapy or in their practice?
So so I'll tell you one of the major aspects of Gestalt, and you can look at it independently with or without Gestalt.
Oh,
Gestalt is about looking onto what is for what it is, by removing the projections and by removing every definition. If you can see what is instead of your past history, your past emotions, your understanding, your knowledge, your experience, ये सबको हटाने के बाद आपको जो दिखता है वहां, अगर आप उस चीज को देख सकते हो, तो then you are in the field of Gestalt. Gestalt is seeing what is. Gestalt is seeing what is in the now, not yesterday, not what it will be. It's not seeing the potential of what it could be. It's not seeing what it was and what it went through. It's also not seeing the content which was engraved in that in the past. Now, if somebody can come in this field to see, then you're already you're practicing Gestalt. Yeah, and I think most of the therapists who are centering themselves and then coming to the field to ride the wave, um, they're already Gestalt practitioners.
hold on. So yeah, I'm sure that gives a clarity on how Gestalt works or how to identify with it. And my next question, Anil, how would you use? So, are there? Can you share a case study or something wherein we get an idea, or are there any before case study? I would say any principles to keep in mind while practicing Gestalt.
Uh,
So you did
I
say
think,
about seeing the now.
yeah, probably some of the few. potential understanding of Gestalt would be life is happening in the now. Things will go up and come down. There are always two sides of everything. And if you don't see the other side, you are not able to integrate this. We all go through unfinished businesses in our life. We all have limitations. We all have resources. And if we don't tap into the resources, we are going to miss the learnings which are saved in those traumatic experiences. And if you're not willing to work on ourselves, we can just go therapist shopping, and that is of no use. To understand that we all need support, and the one who supports should be us. The therapist should only be the mirror or to whom we go to see what is there, not to fix what's not broken, and not to do party therapy. Yeah,
True. So,
yeah.
any of
Some
your
of the founding
experience?
principles.
Of,
So
uh,
sometimes when a client comes, I think
mm,
one of the fundamental questions is their presenting problem is not the problem. There is a problem which
right.
is in those
Underline.
many layers which they keep, which is saved in the somatic intelligence of their body, which is saved in their nervous system, which is saved in certain parts of their immunology, which blocks the healing. Um, as a therapist or as a Gestalt practitioner or as anyone, like any one of us, our job is to see where are these blocks in the body. And the body is so intelligent. I think it's the most intelligent device of our universe. If you look at this body carefully when the client is communicating, you will be able to pick out the twitches, the certain jerks, the blocks, the communications which is coming from the body. And that is the Gestalt. That is the somatic intelligence of the body. And if we can talk to that, if we can address that, I believe there's a lot of resources which is saved there in that. So when a client comes to me, my first question to them is sometimes to ask them, how do you know? How do you know? If you have to tell me that this is blue in color, or I was hit, or something happened in the past, my question to you is, how do you know? You have a memory of that, right? And
Yes.
your memory is coded in one of the five senses. It's either in the visual modality or in the auditory modality. It's saved in one of the five senses. And if
Yes.
and if the client can distort that sense, they can distort that memory of that experience. So they can knock off the emotion and retain the learning. And I think that's the premise of any therapy.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Very well put.
memory is memory can be with or without emotion. But when memory is associated with emotion, now this can be positive or negative. If it is positive, then we have resources. If it is negative, we have black holes which can suck in. If it is a resourceful state, my job is to bring it to every parts of life so that they become the warm hole so that we can escape this reality of difficulty and go into that reality. But if it's a black hole which is sucking us out, then we need to install those wormholes in between, or we need to understand what is currently stopping us. At which level is that block? Is it at the intellectual level? Is it at the body level? Is it at the capability level? Is it at the belief level? Is it at the identity level? And then the journey begins. So how do you know is a good question. I'm hurt. How do you know? She doesn't love me. How do you know?
That sounds interesting.
It is.
So, so Anand, there is a question from the audience, and the question is that what are the techniques used in this therapy?
What are the techniques used in this therapy? There's a plenty of techniques.
Can you
I'm not a
name of?
technique man. I'm more on the skill side, but one of the favorite techniques would be contact and withdrawing. It could be the open chair, the famous Fritz famous open chair technique. I think all life is an open chair. All life we are on one of
Could you?
these chairs. When I'm telling you, let's say I'm telling you, you know what happened, Misbah, the other day to me? I was standing there and the bus came. I'm on this side of the chair where I'm seeing the bus. And what if I come and tell you, you know, वो बस में बैठे हुए लोगों ने मुझे देखा मिसबा और मुझे देखते हुए भी कुछ नहीं किया. You know what I did? I went to the other side and I'm seeing myself from that side. जिंदगी की हर कहानी में हर पल हम we are on one side of the chair. And well, it's not just two. There are multiple chairs in multiple environments, which has multiple contexts, and they're all being played at the same time. Sometimes we switch from this chair of this environment and this context to that chair 10 years ago to that, and sometimes this chair is talking to that at two different levels. ये सब एक साथ एक ही वक्त पर चलते रहता है. So when you ask me what's going on, I cannot use language and tell you what's going on. That's where the body intelligence comes in picture. That's where the nervous system comes in picture. And that's where Fritz was a genius, to see and to elicit in the very moment. Because अगर वो moment निकल गया मिसबा, then it's gone. Then तो केवल कहानी है ना. Then तो केवल कहानी है. उस कहानी, how do I know that that story is true? If it is not in the body, it's not true. Then तो केवल कहानी है, उसमें emotion नहीं है. A कहानी without emotion cannot be worked on. Then it's only talk therapy. And talk, it's not even therapy, it's only talk. Then there is a problem for every solution. Because बंदे को सुलझना ही नहीं है ना. It's not in the body.
So,
and I think just one more line there. And I think the biggest attempt of the therapist should be to keep the client in the body at all times.
Okay. So my question on that is, how does one do that? Because a lot of people say that ऐसे कर सकते, but कैसे करेंगे ये बताना. If that's
Every
helpful.
time the client escapes the now into fantasies of the past, stories of the past, and into the future fantasies, my job is to bring them back in the now. I want them to talk with their body. I want them to look into the past, but bring the past here. I've worked with clients and I've seen them leave the present instantaneously. They would just go, you know what happened last week? Or they would go, you know what I'm going to do after 10 days? They would have left this body. लेकिन इतने साल इतने लोगों के साथ काम करने के बाद मुझे पता चला है कि the body never leaves the present because it has no other place to go. I've never seen a client disappear, but I've seen them leave the now. And I call them hello, and they will say, oh yeah. The mind is so fast that the body has to cope up with it. And we got to slow the mind down so that it's in rapport, so that it's congruent, so that it is aligned, so that it's bringing in ecology. And that's therapy in itself. So you see, as a therapist, my job is minimal. I don't have to know the tools or the techniques. I just have to have one skill of ensuring that the client is in their body. And now the body knows how to heal. The immune system knows how to heal. If it didn't know how to heal, we wouldn't have survived the 6,500 years of recorded history. The very fact that we've survived this is proof enough that the immune system can heal. All we have to do is get out of the way with our limited thinking, with our beliefs, with our projections, with our conclusions, with our stories, and all of that.
Yes, I think that gives us a lot of understanding about the subject that we are discussing today, and I'm sure there will be some questions from our audience. And yeah, I do have questions for you. In fact, a lot of questions for you, Anand. So there is a
Yeah, should I
question
leave?
from Pooja.
I'm
You
already
can't.
scared.
You can't.
Can I
You
see
have
those
to be.
questions on
I,
my?
you have to be in the now, Anil, for that. You can't go away. So you got caught. Okay, you will not be able to see the questions because it's being on the Facebook Live. You'll have to go on Facebook on Aija's page. I'm going to read the question to you. So,
Ji.
how does the therapist utilize himself or
And if
herself
you
as a
find any tough questions, make sure you don't ask them, okay?
I'll definitely put it across. Okay, so I'm going with a question. Pooja is asking that how does a therapist utilize himself and or herself as a tool that will aid the therapeutic process? As you said that it is important tool that we are or we have.
Yeah. Pooja, good question, and thank you for asking that, Pooja. When the client is centered, when the client is breathing in the now, I'm sorry, when the therapist is centered, when the therapist is breathing in the here and now, when the therapist has detached from the past and the future, when the therapist is fully present in the moment, you are in a position to see the client for what they are. And that, in many ways, will anchor the client to be in the now as well. That, in many ways, is building rapport with the client. And that is being a perfect mirror to the client. Now, the client can see themselves. So, when Fritz says that the most potent tool that the therapist has is the therapist himself. When Fritz said that, what he means is to be actively centered, to make sure that you're breathing well, that your shoulders are right, that your spine is erect, that your 60-pound head is balanced well on the spine, that you're breathing well, your blood is going formally, normally well, and you're not trapped in your own stories, because that 1 hour or 45 minutes belongs to the client. How much can you give the whole of you to the client? I
Very
hope I
well.
answered you, Pooja.
Yes, I'm sure that is what she's looking for. Um, yes, so there's one more question. Which are the disorders effectively that can be handled with just all therapy?
So that's a question which is putting a lot of responsibility on the therapy, the modality. My question is, or my response would be, it all depends on the therapist, on how much creativity can you bring to the field, how much of your boundaries can you expand, how much of risks can you to try.
Are you there?
Something happened, I guess. The screen froze. Did the screen freeze?
No, no. I can see
Hello.
you and you will.
Okay, okay. Sorry.
No.
Okay. So it depends on how much the therapist can play on the boundary, can stand on the edge and see more. The subject by itself is just an open source code. The capability of the subject is brought out by the capability of the therapist deciding how much the client is willing to play. But as long as it's not a clinical case. Now, when I say be it Gestalt or be it any modality, these are just studying the neural anatomy of the body, and it's in no way substitute to clinical support. It's not
Yes.
one without the other. I took a seminar someday, some 4 weeks ago, and there was a participant who was very excited. He got the client off the pills overnight. Now, I would strongly recommend that it's not one without the other. It takes two to know one. So it's not what cases can Gestalt solve, it's how much of creativity is the therapist bringing to the field.
Um, I would suggest, or if you could share one of the examples, if you would have done or used it,
Uh,
because what
Plenty,
will
right?
happen, it becomes
Trauma.
easier for
I'll
people to understand it.
I get it. So normally what is that the client will come on the chair with? The client will come on the chair with, my relations are not good, I'm not making money, or somebody did something to me, or I'm having a past trauma, or I've been abused brutally, or um, one of these, right? You want to throw something more on that? Now,
No.
you get anything on the field. Yeah, my job, if I'm using Gestalt therapy, is to find out the client, tell me more. I need to know where is this event happening in his head, and who are the key players or invested components in the client's head, and then to see what is the interplay there in that matrix, what's happening in that constellation, and what will happen if I shift the energy center a little. What will happen if I bring in additional energies in between? And what will happen if I move it? If I bring in the fourth position, if I work on the field? And that's basically changing the frame, extending the boundary, because so far people begin to believe that this is how it is. And Gestalt is about opening up curiosity. They have stopped the channel of curiosity, which is why they begin to believe that this is what happened and this means this, and because of this, I cannot have more money, or I cannot have better sex life, or I cannot have a better family, or I cannot whatever. They've concluded something based on a belief which has happened in the past.
And if somebody, sorry, am I interrupting or can I ask the question right now? Or can
Of
I ask it
course,
later?
of course, of
Yeah.
course.
So, if somebody has such belief, like that you said, which is a belief from the past, how does one go about,
So put a
restructuring?
belief. Let's take a case. Put a belief. That's the best way I can work. Otherwise, it's all theory.
Yes. So, belief is, um, shit, I can't remember. Okay. I can say, um, I am. See, for example, I feel that I'm not good enough.
Take a real
Let's say.
one. I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah.
good enough.
I'm taking a real one. Yeah, I will say
Very good. That's mine too. Huh?
that.
I'll first, and then you got to work with me on this. Okay. My first is, from which age did you pick this up? Or probably I'll ask you, how do you know this is true?
um, how do you know is to would be something that I'll be able to give you instead of age?
Yeah.
Um, uh, when I don't see the results, the hard work being put.
When you don't see the results, what do you tell yourself?
कि यार तुमसे ना होगा ऐसा कुछ something like that.
And for how long have you been telling this to yourself?
It could have been a longer time. Yeah,
Take a number. 2 days, 2 years, 10 years,
you can say at least more than 5 years.
more than 5 years. Before 5 years, did you still believe that you're not good enough?
Yes.
So it's more than 5 years. Let's go back a little more and tell me, how long was this?
Oh, I think then maybe it's if I had to give it a understanding, it's from childhood.
It's from childhood. But definitely it's not from birth, because psychology tells us that we're not born with beliefs. So definitely it's after birth.
After.
Yeah. How about, so see, right now you're still on one chair, okay? You've not gone to the other chair. Okay. So ask yourself, what was that event where you formulated this event, this belief? How old were you in that event when you first decided that I'm not good enough? And you don't have to tell me the event, but just
Mhm.
you should know that you've
Yeah,
got it.
I think I can recall.
You can put a finger on that.
Yes.
And can you also tell me the number of people in that event when you were where you were when you
Um, two.
two? And when you say I'm not good enough at this point in time in the present, whose voice do you hear more clearly?
One person. Not
One
that the
person.
person might have said that
I
you're
get
not
it.
good enough. It's just that I have got it.
I get it. So these are all borrowed beliefs that we pick up in the journey of life. And now we'll put that person on that chair and this person on this chair to see what was the positive intention of that person, to see what were you seeking, and then to see where the collapse happens.
Are we doing that right
Yeah.
now, or
Do you want to?
I'll take it on later on? My questions will go away.
Yeah. You
So
see, it's
thank you,
always
Anand.
client
That was
centric, right?
yes, absolutely. I think it was a very much a first-hand experience. Yeah. I'm sure it will get more clarity on that. So I'm going to go ahead with the other set of questions. Uh, so I think one of the viewers has asked about, is it Gestalt is similar to mindfulness?
You can say anything. Gestalt is equal to an orange fruit. I have no problem. See, if you
अरे
ask
उन्होंने
me what
क्वेश्चन
is
पूछा है ना.
Gestalt, मैं वही बोल रहा हूँ आपको. Is it equal to mindfulness? Every form of therapy is equal to something. Yeah, and mindfulness is a skill. It's not a tool, it's not a technique. If you have mindfulness, you don't need any tool. Everything else is a tool, everything else is a technique. It's a technique to bring you in the now. So, which is what I
Yes,
began by saying, that the tools will fail, the techniques will fail, but the skills will not. So, when potential is called out of the body, when you experience the call of action, you don't search tools. If you don't have the skill, the tools are of no use. I read this somewhere, that a fool with a tool will still be a fool if you don't have the skill. So, yeah, hypnosis is mindfulness. NLP
yeah,
is mindfulness. What is not mindfulness?
absolutely. I think I completely agree with you on that.
What is not mindfulness?
So I think that answers your question. There's one more question. Can Gestalt be used with children for their studies? Is it beneficial?
So, I have a viewpoint which says
Mhm.
children are just amazing. Children are already grandmaster NLPers and grandmaster
Ah,
Gestalt therapists.
I can agree
उनसे
on
कुछ करवाना हो तो सीख लो आप उनसे कुछ. Instead of telling them that this is monkey, monkey, find out what their interpretation is of that animal. When you show them, that is getting them in the submodality, and you will be able to model or see something very pure there. Education is just conditioning them, and that is why, as a nation or as a world, we have lesser budgets for schools and more budgets for prisons. And and schools just kill that creativity, right? So I would say kids are creative. Don't use a modality to condition them, to block their critical filters. Instead, find out what is their interpretation, and that is the interpretation.
very well. I think
They are amazing Gestalt practitioners. If you see them, they have no other place to be but in the now.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's
Yeah,
one thing that we can learn from them.
yeah. And to respond to the client, the participant, the viewer who asked me the question, I would say yes. My answer is yes. You can use that for whatever you want, because creativity lies with the therapist. It's just an
Yeah.
open source code, right? It's like Android.
Yes.
आप इसके साथ कुछ भी ऐप बनाओ.
Mhm.
It's based on your creativity.
Okay. There's one more question from Suryakant. He's asking, can Gestalt therapy help clients with OCD because it is making OCD clients more aware when they are already very vigilant and aware of the contamination?
So when you're working with an OCD client, your job is to empower them with awareness. And we don't know whether they are aware of that, or they are pattern driven, or they are past behavior driven, or is it an autonomic response to a particular trigger. It's a standard, it's a trigger behavior reward pattern. Yeah,
Right.
and there is no so OCD is a case of, or depression is a case of no exit strategy. Because they don't know how to exit that field, they repeat the loop. So depression goes in that format, right? Depression goes in the format of,
Yes.
I look back in my life and I say, shit, yaar, fuck, how did she do that to me? Right? I see a visual. Then I get into the feeling of it and I say, shit, oh my God. And then I again see the image, I listen to the voice and I get into the feeling. I again see the visual. I'm repeating this loop without having an exit strategy. Depression, OCD, they all don't have an exit strategy, which is why they keep repeating the loop. Awareness will bring in the exit strategy unless they have a clinical case.
And can
So
you
your
share?
job,
हाँ,
yeah,
बोलिए, go ahead.
yeah. So as a therapist, as a caregiver, as a parent, as a teacher, your job is to ask the client a few good questions by making them feel safe. And that's the most important aspect too. So I had a client who would want to peel off the nail because their nails would talk to them. So it's a combination of OCD and hallucination, and there was a lot of aspects going around with that client. I asked that client, what would happen if that nail continues to talk to you and you don't listen? So it's getting too loud. I said, would it be possible if you could turn off the volume a little? It's a good 2 month process, and the client was on medicine. But it's telling the client, it beginning with acceptance, then getting into allowance. See, acceptance is one thing. Acceptance without allowance doesn't give you the motivation to accept that behavior. हम कहते तो है कि I accept you for who you are, but do we allow that who you are to live? So acceptance के साथ जब तक allowance mixed नहीं है, action के लिए fuel नहीं मिलता है. So when you meet an OCD client ever, how about not tagging them as OCD? What would they now be if they didn't have your definition? You see, now they don't have an expectation to live up to. Now they are not their behavior. Separate people from the behavior. People are not the problem. The behaviors can be worked with. Separate the problem from the person. Now deal with the problem and not the person.
One of
So
our
step
present.
one is to, yeah, one of the presuppositions of NLP. So step one is to remove the person from that label. Second is allow the client to do what he's doing, and ask the client sometimes, what would happen if you do not close it? If it's a tap or the door. And ask the client, what would happen if you delay the closure? What would happen if somebody else would close it instead of you? To play with creativity, to expand their horizons, to open up their belief systems, to get them to stand on the edge of their beliefs so that they can see more. And when they see more, walk with them there as well. That's bringing in safety. That's removing the label. That's removing the definitions. Because what you define, you have to defend. And one of the biggest problems of teachers and counselors or whoever who deal with this space is they're too quick to put a category or a classification. And there's a big difference when you say he's undergoing depression. There's a difference between being depressed and having depression. And that's the big difference. If we can remove that label. There was a client who comes, a mother who brings the client and says, my daughter is going through depression. I said, what is depression? I don't know. She got angry with me. She says, but you are the therapist. You should know what depression is. I said, I don't know what depression is. What is depression? I didn't want to accept the definition. And she says, she locks herself and sits in the room. I said, great. So we know what we're working with. We're working with she locking in the room and sitting there. And it's not depression. It's not depression. I asked the mother, what happens to you if she locks the room and sits there?
I can so well connected to it.
And I asked, what happens to you? Because the client is perfectly fine. She has no problem. The more you nag, the more she blocks that. And I asked the client, what else do you do? She was good in drawing and she didn't feel confident to come out in the world outside. And she was not yet on medicine. You know, you don't take one behavior and make it the whole. That's the very moment when you find out the other behaviors in the client and see if you can bring all of that in the field. Let the client identify herself with her drawing and her ability to identify good Netflix movies. Because not just talking in the room and sitting is the ultimate behavior. She also exhibits more behavior. So, what would the client be if that definition was not there? Now, healing
Yeah,
is easy.
it's a lot of think through process for all of us. And yeah, it gives clarity hopefully to the person who asked the question. One second. Suryakant,
Are
yes.
viewers
Uh,
getting what I'm saying? Because I can't see anything. I don't know
uh,
if they're
yeah,
getting
yeah,
it, not getting it.
they
They're,
they are able to hear you and see you very clearly, Anil. So don't worry on that.
I'm just talking to a screen where I can see you.
You're talking to
So I
me.
don't know.
You're not talking to a
Yeah,
screen.
I know. I'm saying all I'm doing is having a screen here, and I can see one face. I don't know what the pulse is. I'm not able to get feedback.
I'll give you the pulse, and later on you can check the pulse online. So one second. I think yes, Suryakant, that answers your question. And there's a question from Anita. I think people are not a problem; their behavior needs to be worked upon. Yes, absolutely. That's what we were talking about. Uh, are any more? Can you give us? So you had talked about to be mindful, to get out of a situation, being mindful. Uh, how does
Say
one
that
do
again. I
that?
missed that. Say that again.
To get out of any kind of a labeling or a situation, one needs to be mindful, right? That's
When
what you
you are
said.
mindful, you don't have to get out of the situation. You become bigger
Mhm.
than the situation.
Figure that the situation.
When you
Okay.
become bigger than the situation
Mhm.
can be incorporated in your resources. Now, the
Mhm.
situation is not a problem. You have the tools necessary to work with it.
Mhm. Okay, fine. I think I get it on that. So, any kind of with Gestalt, any kind of challenges that you feel that there are there while working in, with this therapy?
Whatever challenge the therapist brings in is the challenge that Gestalt has. Whatever the therapist brings in is the challenge Gestalt has. And that's true for cricket also. Whatever limitation the player brings in is the limitation of the player of cricket and of the team at that point in time. We bring in
Okay,
our creativity and we expand the game.
absolutely.
So, so I say work on yourself more than anything else.
Yeah, that's very important. That's what I second your thoughts
And
on.
that is a constant work. It's the practice of the practice which you do every day without getting tired, without getting bored. It's brushing your teeth every day, relentlessly.
Absolutely. So, since you said that the challenges are brought by the therapist itself, so would you say the same thing for the kind of limitations also, if there are with
Yeah.
Gestalt? Okay.
Yes, because Gestalt is defined by the people using it. So if you would have taken a problem to Fritz, he would have worked brilliantly with the client, and if you would bring it to me, probably I may get stuck in some place. Me getting stuck is not Gestalt getting stuck.
Wow,
It's my
that's
limitation.
yes, that's
The
quite a.
subject is beyond me.
Mhm. So, Anil, can you share an
And to
example?
give and to
Yeah.
give myself the permission to be stuck, because I'm as human to be stuck. I'm not perfect, and I don't choose to be perfect. I'm enough, and I'm just the way that I am. So to be okay to be stuck. And sometimes we would work with the client midway, and then I would realize that, damn, I could have changed this 4 dialogues before. The awareness will dawn at some time. There would be an intuition sometimes. But I think that's the risk we are willing to take. That's the interplay. That's therapists or therapy or coaching or facilitation. They're all like art. Art has no limitation. There can be forms of art, but it has no limitation.
Very well. So, I think there's a question from the audience. Being in the present is something so there's Pooja is asking the question that being in the present is something I do find it difficult to do. Can you throw some light on it and how to build on that?
I wish we could take Pooja online and ask her what is the difficulty that she has in being in the present, because there is no problem being in the present.
And she is listening to you right now.
Yeah.
If
So,
you
Pooja,
want to.
there is no problem being in the present. Even a 1-year-old child can do it. How difficult is that?
Okay.
So, the interference, the expectation, and the conclusion that you bring, where first of all you said it is difficult for me to be in the present. It's a presupposition, it's a belief,
Yes.
and it's a definition where you say I find it difficult to be in the present. How about reframing that? How about editing that and saying that I'm attempting to be in the present, or I'm curious to know what it takes to for me to be in the presence, because bhasha anubhav ko paida karta hai. Language creates experience, and experiences creates the feeling, and feeling creates the healing. So if you can work with language, you can work with words, you can bring in bodily changes. So what would you lose if you are in the present, or what is stopping you from being in the present, or what would you find more about yourself if you are in the present? Are you curious to see for yourself what it is like to be in the present? And once you come in the present, there are times when you will miss the present. You will go into the past and the future. But now that you know how to come into the present, there's a route carved. You can miss the moment and come back again. Then that's life.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Pooja, I'm sure that your question is very well, beautifully answered by Anil. And if you could just
We
share
hope
with
that.
us, I'm sure she'll give a feedback on that. So my question was that, well, how do you go about using Gestalt with other modalities? How do you integrate? Could you share a
I
case
feel
study?
I feel how do you not integrate is my question. How do you make a forest with demarcation? How do you have a jungle where there isn't integration? We have to work very hard to create partition and borders. Naturally, it just blends, and there's an amalgamation. All tools are parts of the whole. Gestalt is also a part, it's not the whole. And I find it intriguing sometimes when certain people vouches for one modality. Remember, it's the part, it's not
Yes,
the whole. Everything is a part. So when you're working with a part, you are bringing in components of another. That's what, even if you don't want to do it, you are doing it in many ways. And different people would bring it in different ways. Just that some of them would define by saying that I'm working with Gestalt and Pranic, or I'm working with Gestalt and NLP, or I'm bringing in Gestalt and hypnosis, or NLP and hypnosis. How do you separate the Milton from NLP? How do you separate the fish from the water? How do you separate the Sati from the Parvati? How do you separate the Tandav from the Natraj? क्योंकि ये सब एक ही चीज का पहलू है ना. गेस्टॉल्ट का मतलब ही वो है. It takes two to know one. That's Gregory Bateson at his best. वो
yes,
कहते ही है ना कि the moment you say I love you, you should know that you're going to hate that person in the future at some point in time. The moment you say that there is a birth, that very moment death has been defined. The other polarity is born the moment the moon shines. There is a dark side of it. But the dark side is beautiful. The suppressed feminine will be so dangerous. The suppressed masculine will be so dangerous. And therefore, the dance of the two is the gestalt. How do you not let my feminine meet me, who could be even masculine?
that's deep, Anil. I'm sure people are able to connect with it. You want to throw some light on little bit more case studies, so that people get an idea about how things work?
I think one of the areas that I normally work with is femininity, and it's not gender female.
Huh,
It's
I get it.
um,
Yes.
yeah, it's. I somehow feel that femininity is lost in our planet, and now when I work with clients in the dreams that they bring to the field, I see a lot of femininity in the expressions that they bring. And I think femininity is now coming out across our planet in different ways, in more empowered ways, in ways that sometimes the masculine cannot see it, don't want to see it, wants to suppress it. And once this yin and yang is balanced, once we understand that this is where the Lakshmi is, where the money is blocked, this is where creation is, where relations are blocked, this is where the femininity is. And it's not the Madonna which you keep on the pedestal. She's also a whore. And to accept both, it's the theory of the Don Juan. And to know that's the whole, and to be brave enough to see that, to witness that in the dark side of the moon. And unless you see that polarity, how do you embrace this side? So one of the most common aspect is the active centering of the male and the female. And I think nearly 70-80% of normal problems could be fixed just by balancing this, the yin and the yang.
Can you pick one of the problems, such problems, so that people
Anything,
can?
relationship problems, the husband wife polarity difference, the passive aggressive communication that they have, it's an outcome because of one of the energies suppressed so bad. That's where the ego comes in picture, where you want something on the concrete. It could be sex, it could be money, it could be identity, it could be the ego. It's something that you want, and that want is so strong and it's so concrete. But if you shift that, the energy of the wolf, the archetype of the wolf, if you shift that using the Gestalt polarity collapse, if you shift it to the other side, when that want becomes malleable, it becomes spiritual. Imagine that's the goddess. And the goddess was thrown out of the Garden of Eden right in the beginning of creation. But now we need to bring that back, balance it in our body through all these form and formalities that we have. And that's the interplay. The moment I speak to my husband, my wife, my mother, my child, who do I become? Whatever role I take, what energy am I bringing in? What archetype am I becoming? And that's the dance on the chair. And it's beautiful to see how they long to meet each other. If the therapist is willing to just be a mirror without interfering, they will meet in less than 20 minutes. But when the therapist interferes, the ego comes in. Now the ego plays the game. The ego don't want to meet. The ego wants to build bigger barriers, stronger fortresses, because the ego says it's me and it's you who are the problem. And then the dance gets disrupted. But the Shiv and the Parvati, the Sati and the Parvati, it's one. And Sati must dissolve ताकि वो पर्वत सी फिर से जन्म ले, जो शिव की आंखों में देखे और उसी शिव के अहंकार को हाथ पकड़ के नीचे लेके आए। तांडव को नीचे आते आते नटराज बनना पड़ता है। दैट इज द गिफ्ट।
Wow, that's like a lot of emotions in that.
Yeah, Gestalt is
Uh,
drama.
I'm sure I'll have to explore it more.
And Tim was a
Lovely.
great director.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I missed that part of being with him on those
Yeah,
platforms.
he danced
Um,
with all of us in the class.
oh, absolutely.
He would bring
And
in
it was fun.
he would bring
It
in
was
the
fun
magic.
watching.
He would look into our eyes and he would be so fucking brutally honest that
Yeah,
we
yeah, I
would be
remember. And
shattered, we would be broken.
I do remember one of the experience with him. He called me for some demo, and I'm like, oh no, that was like 10 years back, 11 years back. This is
I
not
know.
happening.
Yeah.
So lovely. So I think there's a question from Anu that how to deal with a client who is in a habit of calling and message to his friend who suddenly stops talking to her.
Vapas bolo, how do I deal with a client?
So there is a client. How do I deal with a client who is in the habit of calling and messaging to his friend who suddenly stopped talking to her?
I'm confused. So there is a
Okay,
client.
I'll tell you. So the question is, the viewer is asking a question that there is her her client who keeps on calling and messaging uh, her friend, his friend, who is stopped talking to her.
Very simple, right? Pull out the
Yeah.
locus of the focus from there and give purpose somewhere else.
And how do you do that?
The 68-year-old Irish woman came to me once and told me, I want to leave drinking, Anil. I said, great, what's stopping you? She says, but I'm so habituated with it. You see, the locus of her focus was, I've got time and I'm going to drink and I'm enjoying this. I asked her, when you stop drinking, can you picture yourself that you stop drinking and your life is without drinking? Now, what are you doing? She said, I read books now. I said, excellent. Why don't you start reading the books while you are drinking? You know, it's not without this and then this. We can start one high and one low, and eventually we can change that.
Absolutely.
But
Very
before
well
that,
put.
I want to ask a question to all the viewers over there. Are they really following what's happening here? They could just type yes if it is yes, and
Yes,
please don't
yeah.
type no.
So please, guys, who are asking questions and getting your answers from Anil. Anil is quite curious to know whether you guys are able to make sense out of
Yeah.
it or not.
Are you engaging yourself? Are you having fun listening to Miss and me? Are you finding some answers? Or are you confused more? If you're confused, I think we've done our job well. But do come back tomorrow for the new, but do come back for the next speaker tomorrow. They're going to be more fun. iCharles is doing an amazing job bringing in, I think, one of the finest practitioners in the city to you. I saw Kirti Bakshi the other day. I have high respect and regards for Kirti. She's a dear friend.
So thank you, Anil. So there's a question, Anil. I think we're almost about to wrap it up, although, but we do have a few questions. We'll take them up. So there's an example given by Nidhi, and she's saying a husband betrays a wife, and the experience becomes traumatic for her. After a while,
Yeah.
things settle down, but the lady does not know how to establish trust again.
Yeah,
How do
good
we?
question. And that's normal. When Mother Teresa was asked, how did you work with so many people? She said, one at a time. So, how do you build the big trust back? A little by little, baby steps, small steps. And it's if she's not able to trust somebody outside, it's not the problem of that person. She's been telling a story of how she's lost trust with herself. So, to bring the self worth back, she's taken the betrayal as an identity issue and as a belief issue and something on self worth. Her personal self image, her PSI, has been diluted and damaged. So as a therapist, your first job is to install that back in her. Help her find her value, her purpose, her contribution, make her life more meaningful in her own eyes, and make her live for tomorrow for the contribution that she's doing to this world in how she's making it a better place. And then she can walk that walk and can keep on going on.
Yes, I think that's interesting. And let me check and if there's no more questions coming. Okay. How to
कोई
balance?
गाली तो नहीं दे
Niku
रहा
is
ना?
asked. नहीं नहीं कोई नहीं दे रहा. I'm sure we
देख
are
रहे तो
doing.
अब डिलीट कर देना.
नहीं नहीं इतना
मॉडरेशन
भरोसा है
स्ट्रांग कर
अनिल.
देना.
अनिल हमारा हमारा गुडविल अच्छा है उस मामले में. I'll take that as a. I'll compliment ourselves for that. That we are doing a
Awesome.
decent job. So
Of course you
there's a
are.
question from Ritu. How is about how to balance the yin and the yang.
Yeah, many ways. Maybe by drinking sufficient water and hydrating, or maybe breathing well, spending some time closed with your eyes and seeing where is the breath right now, and to see that you bring it down to the center, to your navel. To practice that many times before you open up to the world, see that you open up inside. To know how is your head right now. Okay. To
Yeah.
know how is your head right now. Is too much down? Is it this side? Is it pulling the spine and to put it back, to put your shoulders back and to breathe again? So, how do you balance the yin and the yang? There are 1,000 ways. These are simple ways. There are complicated ways also. Everything works. Take the one which you find like brushing your teeth. You can have a motor brush, you can have a four-color toothpaste, you can have all the fancies. But also the Dat Manjan works. So you have to decide which tool you want to use to balance your yin and yang, because that's the responsibility you have to your own life. And that's your contribution to your own self, because the gift of life is just once in a lifetime.
Fair. Um, any your person? How is Anil your personal experience been with the Gestalt? What brought
My
you?
personal experience, I would say people are amazing and all problems are within the same domain. And most of them begins with self-worth. Most of them begins with belief and identity clash. Most of them come with a locus which is very external. Most of them, people are basically very simple also, but because schools and universities and churches and medias have told them what they should want and how goals should look like, they're basically lost. If you could bring back the simplicity, life is beautiful again. And and I think in my experience, that's the beauty of therapy. Dick has told all of us that therapy is so good that it should not be restricted to the sick alone. It's so beautiful, restricted to the sick alone. That's been my experience.
Very well. Yes, so I'm just going to finally check once if we have any questions. Otherwise, I think we are good to go for the day. Yeah, we are almost done and through for the session. And it was wonderful interacting with you,
Thank you, Muskan.
knowing a lot about Gestalt. I'm more so curious now, since I am a
You've told
person
this
who's too
16 times now.
curious. Yes. And
How many more speakers
uh,
lined up?
we do have, I think, another, not today. Today is one session. We
No, I
have it
mean
daily,
tomorrow. And
and we have another 5 to 6 more to go, I think, as of now.
there's a lot of resources in the field, and I think viewers can take in a lot from this channel.
Absolutely. Um, we are doing what we can do the best. And thank you so much, everybody who's been watching us. And I hope it has been a resourceful session for all of you. And thank you, Anil, for your time and your inputs. And I'm going to see you guys again tomorrow at, thank you. I'm going to see you guys tomorrow again at 4 o'clock. And tomorrow's session is going to be relationship counseling. But